Well, here we are, back again with another special summer episode of our Blast from the Past, where we've selected interviews from our archives that we think you would like to hear again. I do hope you really enjoyed the 3 little nuggets that we tracked down for you in our July show. Now we're going to do it all over again with 3 more memorable stories that we've handpicked for you. I'm delighted to be with you again and welcome your company. This is Maggie West. And as always, we've got 30 minutes together, so let's relish some of these memories. Even if you didn't catch them the first time around, believe me, your time will be well spent tuning in to listen. Now, way back when we were in our 20s, did any of you dream of travelling across the pond? Well, that's just what Tim Albert did. Twice.
I was about to take a bus out of Atlanta and I went up to a couple of very nice ladies. I call them old, they're probably about my age. And I said, excuse me, could you tell me where I could get something to eat? Thinking they'll indicate the nearest sandwich shop. At which point one of them dug into her handbag, brought out her purse and started offering me money. And I said, no. And I explained what I was.
Just saying Buckingham Palace conjures up a picture of royalty and the luxury life they must lead. But what's it like behind the scenes, working as a maid?
And I went through Green Park thinking, well, I've been to Buckingham Palace. I haven't seen anything very royal or very grand, but nevertheless I'd been. And then a day or two later, and another letter came and it offered me the post of housemaid at Buckingham Palace.
The technology we enjoy today we take for granted. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Much of it is down to something called quantum physics. Always a mystery to me.
I'm pretty confident, that the Earth goes around the sun, not the sun around the Earth. And if I jump off a building, gravity will pull me down to the ground. So therefore I won't do that. But you never know, ideas and science, it may be there's that tiny, tiny chance that maybe we are wrong about something. And we have been wrong.
Remember, these experiences and stories are from our fellow u3a members across the country and encourage us all to continue to learn, laugh and live. So, I'm going in. Please come with me. So back in June 2021, Peter Clift talked to journalist Tim Albert from Fetcham u3a. As a 22-year-old student in 1969, he took a life-changing journey across America by Greyhound bus. 50 years later, he did it all over again, older, wiser, and curious to see what had changed. Tim shares insights from 2 very different Americas.
It's Peter Clift talking to Tim Albert from Fetcham u3a. My first question. How did you, a 22-year-old student, come to ride around America on a bus in 1969?
Yeah, in 1969, I was a student. I was just coming up to my last year. And like I think many students at the time, many people at the time, we looked wistfully at what was happening over the Atlantic. I tried to go in 1968 and it all fell through. That year, my father had a phone call from somebody who he met on the boat going over to America in 1938. It was his trip of a lifetime. And this man had come back to London and he looked up my father and we met him and we became friends. And he was a lawyer in New York and he became my sponsor. I had a friend at the time, an American, and it was through her and her father that I managed to get a job on the Pasadena Star-News in California. So it was really a pivotal trip that changed my life.
What was America in 1969 like for you, an English lad going abroad?
Oh, I think the size of everything. I was prescient enough to keep a diary. It was just the scale of everything was just extraordinary, I think.
One thing that intrigues me, when you returned 50 years later, and I want to talk about the changes in a moment, but presumably the buses were then not as comfortable as they are now.
No, one of the recurrent themes in my diary is I've got arseache. But as a student, we didn't have money for hotels, so we used the buses as mobile hotels, basically. The longest I did, I think, was about 2.5 days. And we slept there. They weren't comfortable at all.
And I guess on your recent trip, they were a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, but generally the buses are what it said on the website. Wi-Fi, a nice place to rest your feet. The seats were more comfortable than the seats on the plane going over. So once you get inside them, they really are pretty good.
What were the main differences that immediately jumped out of you when you went back 50 years later?
I mean, there are all kinds of differences. One on the buses was very obvious because in 1969, my diary reports encounters with all kinds of people, sort of young people, old people, architects, teachers, but above all at that time, soldiers going to and from the Vietnam War. What shook me, one day I was talking to one and I realized he was a veteran. Not only was he a veteran of Khe Sanh, which is one of the famous battles, but he was also much younger than me. So that in itself was a bit of an education. Alas, nowadays, it's all different. You get on the bus, everybody takes out their mobile phone and nobody really talks to you until the end of the journey. That sort of bonhomie has gone.
I know you had a bit of an encounter with an old lady who, in a bus station, who wanted to give you money.
Yes, I mean, the kindness is still there. I was about to take a bus out of Atlanta and I went up to a couple of very nice ladies. I call them old, they're probably about my age. And I said, excuse me, could you tell me where I could get something to eat? Thinking they'll indicate the nearest sandwich shop. At which point, one of them dug into her handbag, brought out her purse and started offering me money. And I said, no. And I explained what I was doing. So it was okay. But I tweeted it that night. And one of my friends said, Tim, just make sure you look in the mirror before you go out in future.
Obviously, when you went over as a young lad, eyes wide open and very inexperienced, you returned 50 years later, a wiser man. Was it as you expected it to be, or was it different?
I think it was different. I mean, on the surface, a lot of it was the same. But then there were places that I've been to that had clearly changed. I mean, Detroit, that was a thriving car capital when I was there originally, is now just full of empty buildings. In 1969, I was just bowled over by the Houston Astrodome, which was this all singing, all dancing, huge construction with the longest bars in the world, with amazing seats, with a flashing scoreboard, which was a great novelty at the time. There was no grass because it had a roof. So it was a plastic AstroTurf, which they kept together with the longest zippers in the world. And I just wrote in my diary, this is amazing. This is American sort of whiz-bangery at its finest. And for 50 years, I always treasured the Houston Astrodome as this sort of symbol of American forward thinking, whatever it was. And I went back and it was closed, and it had been closed for quite some time. And it had that great mark of redundancy, a conservation society. It had been used twice, I think, in the last 15 or so years to house victims from hurricanes. And that was it. It was empty, it was stripped, nobody knew what to do with it.
Even in your 70s, you're still quite fond of Greyhound buses.
There still is not much to beat travelling in a Greyhound bus through some of the lovely parts of America. And there still are many, many lovely parts. One of the difficulties of the bus stations, and I think because they're a public building, they seem to attract people who have nowhere else to go during the day. So some of them are pretty scary. Instead, once you're in the bus, you feel pretty safe. The drivers are still, much as I remember, very sort of calm and with quiet authority. So I didn't feel unsafe on the buses. I'm not sure whether it would be right to say it was easy, because I don't think it was, but I don't regret for a moment I went. It was a wonderful experience, and it was a privilege really to be able to do at 72 what I did at 22. But to be honest, I had to take it a little bit more gently. I certainly drank much less alcohol. I couldn't get my rucksack on the overhead locker without asking somebody, but I did it, and I'm really quite proud I did it, really.
A journey that started with wide-eyed wonder and ended with quiet reflection. That was Tim Albert telling his story to Peter Clift, who captured the spirit of travel then and now. A unique perspective from someone who's seen America from the same seat half a century apart. What's it like to live and work inside Buckingham Palace, I wonder? Not as a guest, but as staff. In 1971, Yvonne Toms did just that. And back in April 22, she told our reporter Nick Bailey what it was like to swap village life in Cornwall for royal corridors. She spent 3 months as a maid at the palace. In what was the Jubilee year, she shares her charming and unexpected story, from polishing royal floors to standing in the Queen's own box at the Horse of the Year show.
71 for 3 months. How did you get the job?
Well, I had been working in Polperro in the village for a summer season, for 3 summer seasons. And I decided during the winter I would do something different. So I bought the Lady magazine. Now, in the Lady magazine at the back, there are a few pages with lots of vacancies for housemaids and nannies and chalet maids and such like. And I spied an advertisement for a vacancy for a housemaid at Buckingham Palace. No experience necessary, full training given, apply to the master of the household. And I thought this sounded quite interesting, and so I did apply to the master of the household.
So take us through the interview process.
So I got the train down there and was met at the gates by a policeman, and he sent for a porter who took me into the tradesman's entrance in Buckingham Palace Road. And then he handed me over to a housemaid who took me to Miss Martin's suite of rooms. There I was shown to her suite of rooms. I was shown into a little anteroom where I could take my coat off and comb my hair and make myself respectable.
Who was Miss Martin?
Miss Martin was a chief housekeeper, and she was a very pleasant lady. She was ex-naval, a very matronly, but a charming lady, and we got on really well. She said she liked Yorkshire girls and knew the county of Yorkshire. And then she said she knew Polperro and loved Cornwall. And so I thought, well, I'm in with a chance here. You know, we're getting on famously. And then we had to start the interview, and I sat down in front of her desk. And the first question she asked me was I good at housework? Well, I sort of told a great big fib and said, yes, I was. And then she went on to explain the sort of chores I would have to perform, and contracts of employment and holidays and hours of working and that sort of thing. And then the interview was over, and I stood and shook hands with her across her desk. And she looked me up and down and said, of course, you realise you won't be able to wear your skirts quite so short. Because, of course, back in 1971, we were still wearing miniskirts. And I had chosen the very longest dress I had, which was knee-length. But that was a little bit short in her eyes. And so then I was seen off the premises, and I went through Green Park thinking, well, I've been to Buckingham Palace. I haven't seen anything very royal or very grand, but nevertheless I'd been. And then a day or two later, and another letter came, and it offered me the post of housemaid at Buckingham Palace. The salary was £577 per annum, rising to a maximum of £622 per annum. We had 3 weeks holiday entitlement, and we worked for a 3 months probationary period where it gave us time for me to decide whether I wanted to stay or whether they decided I wasn't suitable for working in the royal household.
And presumably you got accommodation.
Yes, we lived in. I lived on a floor attached to Prince Charles's floor, because I was assigned to a royal floor. There were royal floors and non-royal floors, good floors and bad floors. And I was quite delighted when I was taken to Prince Charles's floor by my senior housemaid. And then I was shown all around our floor, our corridor, which had 4 bedrooms, numbered 1 to 4, for 4 housemaids. And I was in room number 4 because I was the last to join that floor. And so we had our own kitchen. For the 4 of us, we each had our own bedrooms. We had a bathroom with a shower and a bath, and we had a lovely sitting room, beautifully furnished and decorated. just for ourselves. And at the end of the corridor, there were two large ornate glass doors. And when we opened these doors, there we were faced with Prince Charles's corridor. And he had a very wide, deep piled red carpet. So that was the first day.
Did you get to meet the royal family?
Yeah, the only person I met was Prince Charles. He was in his apartment several times when I had to go in and do a spot of mopping up. Somebody had spilled a drink on his golden-coloured Wilton carpet, and I had to go in and do a quick job till a porter could be sent for. And I passed him in the corridor outside and said good morning to him. I was supposed to have curtsied and said good morning, Your Royal Highness, but I forgot that and just said good morning. But he was quite sweet about it. If I'd started in December when they wanted me to, I would have met the Queen at Christmas and had a gift and shook hands with her. But they don't tell you that before you go. And I didn't start till the January because I had some commitments. So I missed out on the Queen. But I saw people coming and going from my bedroom window and my kitchen window. Andrew and Edward were just little boys running along the corridors with the corgis.
And you only stayed 3 months, but why?
I had been courting a young man in Portperrow during the summer season, and we were writing to each other from Buckingham Palace. And I decided I wasn't going to make a career of polishing taps and brushing footprints out of carpets. I had a lovely time and met some lovely people, but it wasn't going to be a career move. And so when I had my 3-monthly interview with the master of the household, I gave him my notice. He said my appointment was confirmed and they were very happy with me. But I decided that was the appropriate time to give my notice in. And so I gave my notice in and finished a few weeks later. When I came out of the interview, Margaret, the young housemaid, said, "Do you realise you're on the travel list?" And I said, "No, you have to do your 3 months probationary before you go on the travel list." And I was down to go to Windsor Castle. Well, it would have been really nice to have stayed long enough to have gone to all the houses and seen how they operate there and what it's like on the inside. But I'd already given my notice in, so I didn't actually get to travel.
I think one of the perks was that you could go to the royal box at the Royal Albert Hall, couldn't you?
Yes. When the Queen and her family and friends weren't using the box, you could apply to the purser's office for tickets if you fancied going to see whatever was on. And I managed to go 3 times in all. It was quite special. And the very best time was when I went to see an international folk festival with singers and dancers and musicians, and they all came on in turn and did their bit. And then at the end of the evening, they cleared the arena. The whole arena was full of this wonderful colour because they all came back in their national costumes, and they all turned to the royal box and they struck up the royal anthem. And my friends and I rose in the royal box, and they all looked up at us and started to sing the anthem. And if they didn't know the words, they were just smiling at us. And I did just feel like giving them a little royal wave from the royal box, but I didn't dare. It was quite a special time, yes.
And what happened to that young man you were writing to?
Oh, I married him, yes. We've been married for 49 years. The Royal Stationery worked a treat.
Yvonne Toms, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What a charming insight into royal life with someone who had a front row seat. A big thank you to Nick Bailey and to Yvonne Toms for sharing such vivid memories. I hope you're enjoying the show. Have you thought about joining us as one of our guests? Do you have a story to tell, a learning experience you want to share with others? Whether it's a fascinating piece of history, a unique hobby, or a topic that's captured your imagination, you could feature in a future episode. Just tell us about it and we'll do the rest. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you. Contact us on communications@u3a.org.uk. communications@u3a.org.uk. And now back to the show. What do these have in common? Smartphones, LED lights, lasers, GPS navigation, MRI scanners. The answer is quantum physics. It shapes a lot of our modern world, even if we don't notice it. In this episode from 2022, we delved into quantum physics. Yes, that mind-bending stuff that makes you question reality. Peter Clift chatted to top scientist Jim Al-Kahili, who's mastered the art of making the complex simple. So grab your curiosity, hold on to your coffee, and let's explore why science isn't just for the experts, but for anyone who's ever wondered, wait, what? Why?
Well, I think physics in particular, probably when I was about 13 or 14, and as always with these things, it's an inspirational teacher. I think I was always interested in science, but at school I was good at lots of subjects. My mother was more into sort of arts, music, and painting, but I just felt science was, the way my brain is wired. I was good at maths. I realized physics was the subject I needed to study if I wanted to get answers to all the questions I was thinking about. And I really, from the age of 13, I've never looked back.
Your field is quantum physics. In fact, you hold the Distinguished Chair in Physics at Surrey University. Now, quantum physics is a subject, fair to say, beyond the comprehension of most of us, but through your books, TV, you managed to demystify science. Is public engagement an important part of your work? I use the word public engagement carefully because I know you hate the phrase dumbing down.
Indeed.
Important.
Yes. Yeah. The phrase dumbing down suggests that somehow the wider public are not as intelligent as me. And while it's flattering for people to say, oh, Jim, you must be so smart, you understand quantum physics. No, I've just spent my life thinking about it and studying it, like any specialism that someone might have. Yes, public engagement is important for me. I think for the last 15, 20 years, I've pretty much split my work half and half between my academic role at the University of Surrey, teaching, doing research, doing all the things an academic does, publishing papers, getting research grants. But the other half is also sort of the outward looking, broadcasting and writing and giving public talks. I've always said that if I discover something new about how the world works, why would I not want to shout it from the rooftops? So science communication is an extension of doing science, telling people about it. And that's always been, as for me, I've been as passionate about communicating my science as actually doing it myself.
Difficult question, I guess, but which do you prefer, the scientific research or the public engagement?
Yeah, I've been asked this quite often. I think, going back probably 10 years, I was doing a lot more TV work, for example, and I found it was fun and going off exotic locations, although, my programs are for BBC4. So the budgets weren't quite as big as, an Attenborough or Brian Cox production, but I loved it and I found it really sort of stimulating. But I think now, if you were to ask me, you had to give something up, I would always go back to the day job, which is as a research physicist. That's really what, when I'm in the middle of a research program working with my postdocs and my students, that's what my brain is buzzing, thinking about, trying to solve problems. Last thing I think about before I fall asleep, first thing I think about in the morning, if I'm heavily involved in some research problem, that's what really drives me the most.
In your latest book, The Joy of Science, you talk about confirmation bias. And in fact, you say, don't be afraid to change your mind. Now, that's increasingly difficult as we get older. But should we always be prepared to change our mind?
We should try. I mean, it's not human nature to if you believe something to be right or true, then it's really difficult to be persuaded otherwise. And it's the same in science. But the way we're trained in science, that's why this is one of the lessons of the scientific method, is that we do question our hypotheses, our theories, our experimental results, because we know that, if they're wrong, and the truth will out. So we are trained to always question what we think to be correct and true. So I see no reason why the rest of society couldn't also try and do a bit more of that. While we want to have confirmed what we already believe, that's a natural, comfortable state of mind. Push yourself slightly out of that comfort zone and question why you believe what you believe. It may be that you're right, but it may be you're prepared then to see another perspective or point of view that changes your viewpoint on something.
At the moment, we tend to hold everything as true, but who knows, in 10, 100 years' time, that all might be turned on its head, mightn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what we do in science. We're in science, we're never 100% certain about something. I think Voltaire said certainty is absurd. I'm pretty confident, that the earth goes around the sun, not the sun around the earth. And if I jump off a building, gravity will pull me down to the ground. And so therefore I won't do that. But you never know, ideas in science, it may be there's that tiny, tiny chance that maybe we are wrong about something. And we have been wrong plenty of times in science. I mean, just in the past 2 years of the pandemic, scientists really thought that washing your hands and singing happy birthday twice through will stop you catching COVID. Then we learn more, get more data coming in and realize actually it's airborne transmission is more important and you have to open windows. So having uncertainty and valuing uncertainty, I think is important. And I think, again, in everyday life, we shouldn't always be so certain that our view is right, because it may be that, for whatever reason, we've gone up along the wrong path, and we need to be prepared to jump across and not have any shame in changing our minds.
Your research, as we've said, into quantum physics. Now, with so many problems in the world today, climate change, poverty, and everything else, how would you answer those who say we should be dealing with the immediate problems rather than spending money and time on research into quantum physics?
It's an age-old question. Why don't we concentrate on the here and now and not things that are just blue sky research? We don't have the luxury to. Certainly, we have to make choices and we have to prioritize things. But my answer is we do both. Learning about quantum physics is more than just climbing Mount Everest because it's there. Time and time again in science, we've made discoveries which at the time seemed to have no practical use to anyone and end up changing our world. Without quantum mechanics developed a century ago, you and I wouldn't be talking on this podcast because we wouldn't have had modern electronics. So you never know what these things lead to. But also it's part of the human condition that we're curious about the universe and our place in it. And it would be sad for us, for humanity, if we stopped thinking and being curious about the world.
So would you say that it's important then to keep on, in a sense, questioning, looking at new things and what's happening around them?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not only important for our own sort of mental health and well-being to keep our minds active, but there's no age limit on curiosity. We always say with scientists, the scientists are just the children who've never grown up, who've never stopped asking why. Very often, as you grow older, become wiser, maybe you have more time to contemplate and think about your place in the world. That curiosity can be reignited. Through the middle of our lives, we're too busy bringing up children and working and earning a living and all the pressures and stresses of everyday life. I think once you get beyond that hump, you're back in that privileged position of being able to think about the world and be curious again. So absolutely.
How do you see things going in the next 5 years? I mean, as a scientist, what do you see as the next big puzzle?
In terms of science, of course, the big thrust now is how do we mitigate against the worst of climate change? And a lot of science from lots of different directions and disciplines are going to have to feed into this. But at the same time, technology is moving very, very fast. For me, one of the most important areas is artificial intelligence. The whole idea of automation and robotics and machine learning is going to transform our lives as much as the internet has over the last 30 years. It's difficult to look into the future and see what it would look like, but we need to have that conversation about how AI is going to be used, what we use it for, what are the ethical implications of it. 5 years from now, I'm not sure how different things will be. Maybe more of us will have electric cars. Maybe more of us will be using clever algorithms on our computers, making decisions for us. 10 years, 20 years from now, I think our world will be transformed beyond recognition, hopefully in a good way.
Well, that's good news. Let's hope you're right. Well, Jim Al-Khalili, thank you for taking time out of a very busy schedule to talk to us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Science teaches us to question everything, including what we think we know. Stay curious, keep an open mind, and watch where your questions take you. Thanks to Jim Al-Khalili and our reporter Peter Clift for such a fascinating story. That was well worth visiting again, don't you think? I do hope we chose well with our 6 blast from the past topics and you enjoyed them again or even for the first time. The contributions we get from our u3a colleagues are what makes this podcast happen. So a huge thanks to all of those in this month's episode. And of course to our reporters who also work their magic, Peter Clift and Nick Bailey. And where would we be without Bob? Always a well-deserved mention as our editor and producer. Next month is business as usual, where our reporters have been out hunting for interesting stories and learning opportunities amongst our u3a community so we can bring them to you. Do come and keep us company. We have some really exciting interviews in the next couple of months, including a brilliant story of a reporter who's interviewed dozens of well-known famous celebrities and politicians. I think it will be intriguing. Until then, this is Maggie West checking out. And remember, keep well, and as always, learn, laugh and live.